Jinwoo's new enemy, a dungeon that talks back, solo leveling, part 1. The air inside the dungeon was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient magic, a familiar yet unsettling combination for Sung Jinwoo. His boots crunched over shattered bones as he stepped deeper into the cavernous chamber, his shadow soldiers spreading out behind him like a living tide. The dim glow of bioluminescent fungi cast eerie reflections on the walls, revealing jagged runes that pulsed with an unnatural light. This was no ordinary dungeon, something was watching him. Jinwoo tightened his grip on the dagger at his hip, his enhanced senses picking up the faintest whisper of movement. His instincts screamed danger, but curiosity drove him forward. After countless raids, he'd grown accustomed to monsters that roared and charged mindlessly. But this was different. A low, mocking chuckle echoed through the chamber, sending a chill down his spine. "Ah, the Shadow Monarch graces us with his presence." The voice was smooth, almost amused, resonating from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. A talking dungeon? Impossible. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Before he could react, the ground beneath him trembled. Stone cracked open like a maw, and skeletal hands shot upward, grasping at his legs. With a swift pivot, Jinwoo leapt back, his dagger flashing as he severed the bony fingers mid-air. His shadow surged forward, engaging the undead minions that clawed their way out of the earth. The fight was chaotic but controlled, each of his soldiers moved with precision, their dark blades cutting through the enemy ranks. But the dungeon wasn't done. The walls themselves seemed to shift, stone forming into grotesque faces that spat bolts of dark energy. Jinwoo twisted mid-air, narrowly avoiding a searing blast that scorched the ground where he'd stood. His heart pounded, not from fear, but exhilaration. A challenge. Finally. He activated Ruler's authority, the air distorting as an invisible force crushed the attacking statues into rubble. Yet the voice only laughed again. "Is that all you've got, Monarch? I expected more." Jinwoo smirked. "You talk too much." With a thought, he summoned Igris, his nightly shadow, who materialized in a swirl of darkness, sword already drawn. The two moved in perfect sync, carving through the dungeon's defenses. Igris deflected a barrage of magical projectiles while Jinwoo dashed forward, his dagger aimed at the largest rune on the far wall, the likely source of the dungeon's consciousness. Just as he struck, the rune flared crimson, and a monstrous figure emerged, a towering golem of black stone, its eyes burning with intelligence. "Let's see how you fare against me," it rumbled, swinging a fist the size of a boulder. Jinwoo barely dodged, the impact shaking the chamber. This wasn't just a mindless beast, it was learning, adapting. The dungeon was fighting back in ways he'd never seen. As the battle raged, Jinwoo's mind raced. This wasn't just another hunt. This dungeon was alive, and it knew exactly who, and what, he was. And if it could talk, it could think. Which meant it had a purpose. But for now, survival came first. With a roar, he unleashed his full power, shadows coalescing into a swirling storm around him. The real fight had only just begun. Word count, 1,000. Jinwoo's boots crunched over the shattered remnants of the dungeon floor, his shadow soldiers fanning out behind him in perfect formation. The air hummed with residual magic, the walls pulsating as if alive. Then came the voice, deep, mocking, echoing from everywhere at once. "Ah, the little Shadow Monarch returns. Did you miss me?" Jinwoo's grip tightened around his dagger. This wasn't just any dungeon. It was learning, adapting, toying with him. A tremor shook the chamber, and from the fissures in the ground, twisted figures emerged, not monsters, but distorted reflections of his own shadow army, their eyes glowing with eerie intelligence. "What the hell?" Igris growled, stepping forward, his sword already drawn. The doppelgangers mirrored his stance perfectly. Before Jinwoo could react, the duplicates lunged, their movements synchronized with his own forces. Steel clashed, shadows writhed, and for the first time, Jinwoo felt his advantage slipping. Then came the second problem. A familiar presence flickered at the edge of his senses, Cha Hei-in, her aura flaring as she sprinted into the chamber, silver blade gleaming. Relief turned to ice in his veins when he saw her eyes. Blank. Unseeing. The dungeon had her. She fought so hard, the voice crooned. But everyone breaks eventually. Jinwoo barely dodged as her sword sliced toward his throat, her movements unnaturally precise. "Hei-in." He barked, but she didn't flinch. The chamber's walls shifted, sealing the exits. Trapped between his own corrupted shadows and his mind-controlled ally, Jinwoo's mind raced. He couldn't kill Hei-in. But he couldn't let her kill him either. Igris and Beru moved to flank him, but the doppelgangers intercepted, their every strike a perfect counter. The dungeon was predicting his moves. Think. Adapt. Jinwoo feinted left, then twisted midair, using his momentum to kick off the wall and vault over Heian's next strike. He landed behind her, wrapping an arm around her waist while his other hand pressed against her temple. "Sorry about this," he muttered, flooding her mind with a pulse of his own mana. She gasped, her body seizing, then went limp. He lowered her gently just as a doppelganger's blade grazed his shoulder. Blood welled, but he grinned. The dungeon had made a mistake. It had shown him how it worked. Every move, every counter, it was a mirror. So Jinwoo stopped fighting like himself. He fought like Sung Il-hwan, his father, unpredictable and relentless. He fought like Thomas Andre, raw power overriding finesse. The shadows faltered, their mimicry failing to keep up. Igris and Beru capitalized, tearing through the duplicates with renewed fury. But the dungeon wasn't done. The ground split open, revealing a yawning abyss. From it crawled a monstrosity, a fusion of every foe Jinwoo had ever defeated, its maw dripping with venom. "You can't outrun your past, little monarch," the voice taunted. Jinwoo exhaled, rolling his injured shoulder. "Who said anything about running?" He raised a hand, and the shadows answered, not just his army, but the very darkness of the dungeon itself. If this place wanted a war, he'd give it one. As the beast charged, Jinwoo met it head on, daggers flashing, the chamber trembling under the force of their clash. The real battle had only just begun. The air inside the dungeon was thick with the scent of damp stone and something far more sinister, an intelligence that lingered like a predator waiting to strike. Jinwoo's boots crunched over shattered bones as he advanced, shadows writhing at his feet, responding to his every thought. He had faced countless dungeons, but this one was different. It watched him. It spoke. "You're late, Hunter Sung," the voice echoed, neither male nor female, but ancient and mocking. The walls pulsed with a faint glow, veins of mana threading through the rock like a living thing. Jinwoo's grip tightened around his dagger. "I've been expecting you." A trap. He had walked right into it. The realization hit him a second before the ground trembled. From the darkness, figures emerged, not mindless monsters, but hunters. Their eyes were hollow, their movements jerky, as if puppeteered by unseen strings. Jinwoo recognized their guild insignias. These were the missing teams, the ones who had vanished without a trace. Now, they stood against him, weapons drawn. "You've been busy," Jinwoo muttered, his mind racing. The dungeon wasn't just alive, it was assimilating. Absorbing hunters, turning them into extensions of itself. A cold fury settled in his chest. These weren't enemies. They were victims. The first hunter lunged, sword flashing. Jinwoo sidestepped, his shadow soldiers rising to intercept. But the dungeon anticipated him. The ground beneath his feet liquefied, swallowing his shadows before they could fully form. He barely rolled clear as a spear grazed his ribs. Blood seeped through his shirt. Clever, the dungeon mused. But not enough. Jinwoo gritted his teeth. He couldn't fight these hunters, not without killing them. And that wasn't an option. He needed a new strategy. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. "Jinwoo. Behind you." He turned. Cha Hae-in, her silver blade gleaming, charged into the fray. Relief flickered in his chest, but it was short-lived. She shouldn't be here. The dungeon's laughter deepened. "Ah, the S rank. How convenient." Before Jinwoo could warn her, the wall split open. Tendrils of mana lashed out, wrapping around Cha Hae-in's limbs. She cried out as her sword clattered to the ground. The dungeon wasn't just controlling hunters, it was feeding on their mana, growing stronger with every second. Jinwoo acted on instinct. He summoned Igris, the Shadow Knight materializing in a burst of darkness. "Free her." Igris moved, his blade severing the tendrils. But the dungeon retaliated. The ceiling cracked, rubble raining down. Jinwoo barely shoved Cha Hae-in clear before a chunk of stone slammed into his shoulder. Pain exploded through his body. Cha Hae-in's eyes widened in horror. "Jinwoo." He forced himself upright. The dungeon was adapting, learning from his every move. They were outmatched. Then, the worst possible realization struck him. The dungeon wasn't just sentient. It was a fragment of something far older, far darker, the Shadow Monarch's discarded will, left to fester in the depths. And it recognized Jinwoo. Not as a hunter. Not as prey. But as its true vessel. "Join me," it whispered, the words slithering into his mind. "Together, we could be unstoppable." Jinwoo's breath hitched. The offer was a poison, sweet and lethal. Power beyond imagination, at the cost of everything he was. Cha Hae-in grabbed his arm, her voice desperate. Don't listen to it. The dungeon snarled. The controlled hunters surged forward, weapons raised. Jinwoo made his choice. He wouldn't fall. He wouldn't become this thing's pawn. With a roar, he unleashed every shadow at his command. The chamber erupted in chaos. Igris clashed with the mindless hunters, buying them seconds. Jinwoo focused his mana, pushing past the pain. If the dungeon wanted him, it would have to fight for him. But then, betrayal. A blade pierced his side. Jinwoo staggered, turning to see Cha Hayan's tear-streaked face. Her hands trembled around the hilt of her dagger. The dungeon's laughter was deafening. Did you really think I wouldn't take her too? Jinwoo's vision blurred. The dungeon had played them all. And now, he was out of time. Jinwoo stepped into the cavernous dungeon, his boots crunching over shattered bones as the air hummed with an unnatural energy. The walls pulsed like a living thing, veins of dark mana threading through the stone. This place. It's watching me, he muttered, gripping his dagger tighter. Before he could react, the ground beneath him shifted, forming a grotesque mouth that snarled, "Welcome, hunter. Let's see if you're as strong as they say." The voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, sending a chill down Jinwoo's spine. A massive fist of stone erupted from the wall, hurtling toward him. Jinwoo barely dodged, rolling to the side as the impact sent debris flying. "So, you can talk and fight," he growled, summoning his shadows. Ebony figures surged from the ground, their crimson eyes locking onto the dungeon's shifting form. "Attack," he commanded, and his army lunged. But the dungeon laughed, the floor splitting open to swallow his shadows whole. Jinwoo's eyes widened. This thing wasn't just a monster, it was the dungeon itself. He needed a new strategy. Channeling mana into his legs, Jinwoo burst forward, zigzagging between jagged spikes that shot up from the ground. The dungeon retaliated, its voice booming, "Running won't save you." A cascade of stalactites rained down, forcing Jinwoo to weave through them with inhuman speed. One grazed his shoulder, drawing blood. Gritting his teeth, he activated Ruler's authority, yanking a chunk of the ceiling down onto the dungeon's core, a glowing orb embedded in the far wall. The orb cracked, and the dungeon roared in pain. "You'll pay for that." The walls convulsed, birthing monstrous golems that lumbered toward him. Jinwoo smirked. "Finally, something I can hit." He dashed between them, his dagger carving through stone like paper. But for every one he destroyed, two more emerged. His stamina was draining fast. "Damn it, I need more power," he hissed. Then, a familiar voice echoed in his mind, "You've grown stronger, but strength alone won't win this." The system. Jinwoo's eyes flashed, he hadn't tapped into his full potential yet. With a roar, he activated Monarch's domain, a surge of black energy erupting from his body. The shadows he'd lost earlier reformed, stronger, darker. The dungeon hesitated. "Impossible. You're just a human." Jinwoo didn't answer. Instead, he pointed forward, and his shadows moved, faster than before, tearing through golems like they were nothing. The dungeon panicked, its voice shrill. "No. This can't be." Jinwoo lunged at the core, his dagger glowing with concentrated mana. The dungeon screamed, throwing everything it had left, spikes, boulders, waves of crushing force. But Jinwoo was unstoppable. He twisted mid-air, dodging, weaving, until finally, crack. His blade pierced the orb. The dungeon let out a final, deafening wail before the entire chamber shuddered, collapsing in on itself. As dust settled, Jinwoo stood amidst the ruins, breathing heavily. The system's voice returned, "Dungeon conquered. Evolution available." He grinned. This was just the beginning. Jinwoo's breath came in ragged gasps as he stood before the towering dungeon gate, its obsidian surface pulsing with an eerie crimson light. The air crackled with mana, thick enough to choke on, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. This wasn't just another raid, this dungeon was alive, whispering taunts in a voice that slithered into his mind like poison. "You're weak," it hissed. "You'll die here, like the others." His fists clenched, shadows writhing around him in response to his fury. Behind him, Beru and Igris stood ready, their loyalty unwavering even as the dungeon's presence pressed down on them like a physical weight. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. He'd faced gods and monsters, but this was different. The dungeon wasn't just a challenge, it was mocking him, playing with him. And he was done playing. With a roar, he lunged forward, his dagger flashing as he carved through the first wave of creatures, twisted amalgamations of bone and shadow. They fell easily, but the dungeon laughed, its voice echoing off the cavern walls. "Is that all?" More monsters surged from the darkness, their numbers endless. Beru shot past him, his scythe-like arms a blur, while Igris cleaved through the horde with precise, deadly strikes. But for every enemy they felled, 2 more took its place. Jinwoo gritted his teeth. He could feel his mana draining, his body pushed to its limit. The dungeon wasn't just fighting him, it was adapting, learning his moves, countering his strategies. His shadows flickered, their strength waning. For the first time in years, doubt crept in. Was this it? Had he finally met something he couldn't defeat? Then he heard it, a whisper, not from the dungeon, but from within. His father's voice, faint but firm. Strength isn't just power, Jinwoo. It's the will to keep moving forward. Something inside him snapped. His shadows flared to life, darker and denser than ever before. The dungeon's laughter faltered. Jinwoo's eyes burned with determination as he reached deep, tapping into a power he'd never dared to use, the full extent of his monarch's might. The ground split beneath him, and from the abyss, an army of shadows erupted, not just his usual summons, but legions of fallen warriors, their spectral forms answering his call. The dungeon screamed as Jinwoo's forces tore through its defenses, their combined strength overwhelming its twisted creations. He moved like a storm, every strike precise, every motion fueled by sheer will. The dungeon's core, a pulsating heart of dark energy, loomed ahead. With a final, desperate lunge, Jinwoo plunged his dagger into it. The explosion of light was blinding. The dungeon's voice shrieked, then faded into silence. The walls crumbled, the darkness receding like a tide. Jinwoo collapsed to his knees, exhaustion hitting him like a tidal wave. But it was over. When the dust settled, the world outside had changed. The sky, once choked with the dungeon's influence, was clear. Hunters and civilians alike stared in awe as the remnants of Jinwoo's shadows dissipated, their purpose fulfilled. The balance of power had shifted, not just in Korea, but across the world. Dungeons would no longer be mindless death traps. They could be challenged. They could be broken. Jinwoo stood slowly, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. He had faced the impossible and won. And as he walked out of the ruins, the echoes of his victory rippled through the universe, a promise of what was yet to come. The era of fear was ending. A new age was dawning. And Jinwoo would be at its center.